Good evening, everybody. That's it's kind of interesting. We had that as an opening tonight because Michael wasn't ready for it. He's our guest tonight, Michael A. Scott, and that introduction was something that Elliott uh, recorded when he was up at the Burns Club of Atlanta, right, Elliott?
Yes, yes.
And and it just so happens that our guest, Smile Michael, is a piper, and I happen to be a piper, and Michael and I are both members of the Burns Club of Atlanta, so we have that also in common. We've known each other now for 10 or 15 years, and so Michael, tell everybody a little bit about where you are, who you are, and where you grew up, and what your interests are, and then we'll get into canoeing on the rivers of Georgia. That's our plan for tonight.
Well, yeah, I don't want to. I don't want to bore anybody with Walker's always great at chastising me for being too verbose and lengthy, and I, I accept the criticism. I really do. I think he's right, spot on. Uh, I'm a native Georgian. I was born in Brunswick and spent a lot of time uh, on the on the beach, on the ocean, and the inland waterways, and that got me interested in kind of nautical adventures and so forth. And then even when we relocated to Decatur, I continued to have an interest in waterways and uh, just doing things on the water, whether it's a lake or a river. I've always preferred a river because it goes somewhere. A lake, you're just going in circles, I think. And I like the idea of going somewhere, and that was always an appeal to me, and my brother too. And what I'm going to talk about, hopefully later in the program, is how my brother and I kind of did a lot of adventures together growing up, and still do.
Well, did y'all? Well, let's keep going. Where did tell us about your education and what your interests are, other than, in addition to boating and canoeing?
Well, I'm a product of the public school system in DeKalb County. I graduated from Lakeside High School, and I went to Davidson College in North Carolina. That's where I wanted to go. I love the place. And then after I graduated, I wanted to get out of the South just to kind of broaden my experience and also to challenge me. So I applied and was accepted, and we got a full scholarship to the University of Chicago. And I went up there and was there for 3 years and got my master's degree, was working on my PhD. And frankly, I just kind of burned out. I mean, it gone to, let me tell you something. When I thought I was pretty hot stuff when I graduated from Lakeside. I mean, there were like, I don't know how many, but 350 graduating high school kids. And I was maybe in the top 10. And I thought it was pretty hot stuff. But when I got to Davidson, I realized, Mike, everybody here is like a salutatorian or a valedictorian or something. And I realized I had to really up my game. And I did. I tried. And to the extent that, when I graduated, I had a choice of graduate schools, and I ended up, going to the one I wanted to go to, which was Chicago. But when I got up there, I kind of met my match, really, because there were people there. I mean, I had some familiarity with Latin and Greek, and there were people up there that were specializing in Akkadian scholarship, and they were researching Hittite hieroglyphics. And I just realized, I said, my gosh. And I'll tell you, these people, they looked like cadavers because once they checked in to Regenstein Library, they didn't leave. They got no sun. And I just said, I don't know if I'm willing to make that level of sacrifice because I want a canoe.
Tell me, before we keep going, what did you major in down at Davidson and then at graduate school?
History and religious studies. And then when I went to, I was admitted to the divinity school up there. And there were some really fantastic scholars, that were well published. And Martin Marty was my faculty advisor. He was the go-to guy at Newsweek magazine, and that was something. They always went to him if they wanted to comment. He was Mr. Protestant. Jonathan Z. Smith, he was a guy that knew 8 or 10 biblical languages, and he was way above my pay grade, frankly. There were Gerald Brower. There was just some Kitagawa. I mean, there were some fantastic scholars there. And again, I just realized I'd reached my Peter principle, I guess. That was as far as I was going to go. But I finished. I got my master's degree, and I did all the coursework for the PhD. But my Langdon Gilkey died, and one of the problems when you're working on a PhD is if your faculty advisor passes away, you have to start over. And I just really wasn't. I didn't have the capacity to do it, so I stand condemned for you and your audience.
Well, you don't stand condemned for me, so there you go.
Well, I should be.
Yeah. Well, tell me about it. Let's talk about now canoeing. Were you ever a scout, by the way?
That's just what I was going to ask.
No, I wasn't allowed in the Scouts.
Was that because of the police?
Please expand on that.
Well, look, if you grow up, this is a theological issue, but if you grow up as a dedicated Southern Baptist, which, I grew up at Wayuka Road Baptist Church in Atlanta, and the Southern Baptists had, I don't know if they still do, but they had their own competitors to
the Royal Rangers, the Royal
Ambassadors. And then there were the RAs and the GAs. There was the Royal Ambassadors, and then there was the Girls Auxiliary. So I was an RA, and I took, did that. And took later. I was kind of a counselor advisor. Took kids to RA camp outside of Macon, Lake Tabasofke, different places. But it was because they really felt like Scouts were. This is not me, but this is Southern Baptists were saying, God, I hope are there Southern Baptists in the audience that might know where I live?
Well, I just remember that the Southern Baptists wanted scouting to be much more denominationally correct.
Correct.
And so that was their problem. And that's always been kind of one of the things. Scouting has always tried to be very non-denominational and accepting of all religious persuasions, but religious. Scout is reverent, and that was the 12th point of the Scout law, and it's it just said that we will respect each other in matters of custom and religion, and that we will be loyal to our duties to our Creator. So Scouting was never designed as an atheist type organization, not at all. But at any rate, so you did what you did with the yes. What
I'm literally going to ask what you're about to ask. I was going to ask, did you do the Royal Ambassadors courses or ranks, or what are they, and did you participate?
Yeah, I did. Sure. And
what is a program like
that? It's just similar to Scouting, but with it had an overt Baptist. I don't want to say just religious, because Scouting is a faithful organization. Yeah. It's infused with faith, but the Southern Baptist Convention was suspicious of its inclusivity. Mm-hmm. And, I didn't know any better. I mean, I was.
Imagine today's world.
Well, all right, let's move right on to river canoeing. Cause let me just tell everybody that I was at an event. Michael came to it with the Flint River Keeper. And so he started talking about all this river trips that he did with his brother back when they were just teenagers, and
Right.
and they've been on so many of the rivers of Georgia. So talk about that a while, Michael, because and also let's all talk about, and Elliot will join in about what we think is the importance of canoeing itself as a practice. Go ahead, Michael.
Well, again, when I got back from Chicago, my brother, who at the time was a student at Maine Maritime Academy, his focus was on obtaining graduating as a third mate with an engineering degree, which would allow him to navigate super tankers through the Suez or the Panama Canal or that kind of thing. But both of us, again, we had grown up on the water. Our parents were raised in Tidewater, Virginia, on a dairy farm that was adjacent to the James River. And we spent a lot of time on the James River. My father learned to sail on the James River, just outside of Newport News. And when we would visit our grandparents who lived in Portsmouth, Norfolk, Newport News, you got to understand that's the James River, the Elizabeth River. You can't go anywhere without seeing these huge ships. It's the largest naval port in the world, really, particularly for military applications. So we were just, we grew up with that. And when we came back, when both of us kind of came back home for vacations and trips, we wanted to pursue it. And this thing with the Brown's Guide to Georgia had come out. And in when I got back and I got married in 1976, and I started looking at the magazine, and Fred Brown, who, by the way, Walker, grew up or lived in Peachtree City. I mean, that was where he published the magazine. I didn't know that because I was in Decatur at the time. But I got the magazine, and what they did, which was really unique, I thought, is they had a Methodist minister, and then there were also other guys, but Reese Turrentine was a Methodist minister, and he, along with a variety of people, would do these canoe trips, and they would map out what they did. And when I say map out their route, they did the things that would make it feasible for a novice to do. For example, you have your canoe, supposedly, or canoes, and you've got to have a route, a realistic route. So you need a put-in point, right? You need a place where you can put your boat in. And then it's always helpful to have somebody kind of scout the route for you, so that if you're doing multiple days on the river, which we did, you would have some suggestions about where you could pull off the river and camp without having, private owners shoot you or, call the police on you. And then you also need to have a terminus of some sort, because what's important is you have to have a car or a truck. In our case, we had a truck and a trailer where you have your takeout and you could reclaim your boat, put your boat on the trailer, and go back to where you had put in. You know what I'm saying? You've got some logistics involved there. And what was so satisfying about what Reese and Fred and the people there at Brown's Guide did is they mapped out the river. So you knew kind of where
go ahead.
And then you had to have access to the river. And then the other thing is you needed to know places that you might be able to pull over. Yeah, that's great. Where you could pull over and pull out and camp safely, and then take out at the end of the 2 or 3 or 4 day trip. So the kind of advice that they had there was great for us. Now, here's the caveat. When we started doing these things in 1978, there really weren't outfitters. REI, I don't think REI existed. I mean, they didn't have outfitters like we do now. And my brother and I had grown up going shopping at Lenox Square. And the signature shop for us, the go-to place for us, was called the Hobby Shop. I don't know if you know.
I know it well.
It was
Yes.
fantastic. And between the Hobby Shop and S&S Cafeteria there was also a little kiosk where the postal service had a place. But there was a camping store. And my brother and I went in there, and we were just talking up the owners. Again, we're just college kids, And we said, look, could we rent a canoe or a couple of canoes? We'd like to do some trips. And by gosh, the guy said, well, why not? And so we put a deposit down, and we didn't have any, canoes ourselves, but, they had a couple of what they call blue hole canoes. And we loaded them on the back. We didn't have trailers, but we had a truck and a car. 1961 Rambler American was mine. My brother had a truck, a Ford truck we called Friar Truck. It wasn't an F-150. It was a F-100. And I mean, they were all beaters. We're just high school, college kids. That's all we could afford were beaters. But our first trip was the Carnegie up on, in the northwestern part of the state, the Carnegie River. And when you go up there to Dahlonega North, you go through Toomer's Corner. And back in the day, it was pretty remote. I felt bad about it because they had a small cage with a black bear in it, and you could get some provisions there. And again, Fred Brown and Reese had kind of mapped out the route. We put in up there at the Carnegie, and we were, again, this, I don't know if people are familiar with it, but, their rapids are characterized in terms of the drop, how rapidly they drop off within a certain period of time. So you get a class 1, which is kind of just a ripple. You get a class 2, which will kind of bounce you around a bit. You get a class 3, which is a drop, and you're going to take water in. You got a class 4, and you better know what you're doing. I mean, seriously, you better know what you're doing. Class 5, you just be prepared to wrap your boat around a boulder or something like that. It's just pretty dramatic. And the Carnegie there had a class 3 or class 4, somewhere in there, but we didn't quite know where it was. We put in, and we were going downstream, and it was great. We camped the first night, beautiful. It was just gorgeous back in the day. The second day, I'm in the front, and the front is the power stroke. I'm really pushing it. My brother's there, he's coasting. He's the guy, kind of the rudder, He helped a little bit, but he was the rudder. But being in the bow, I could see clearly, oh my gosh, that's what we're looking at, something like that. And we the thing is, you can hear these things before you can see them. You can kind of hear and I hear it like, like, wait a minute, I don't know about this. And my brother says, no, this is going to be good. This is going to be good. I say, we need to scout it first, man. We need to scout it. No, this is good. It's always easier for the guy in the stern to say that than the guy that's going to go over first. As we start approaching the drop, frankly, I could see, hey, this is above. Again, this is really dangerous. We need to. This requires technical skill that may exceed our training. So we get close to it, and I start like backing up, man. I'm backing up like crazy, and he's pushing. So what we're doing is like we're just spinning around. The canoe is spinning around, and anytime we got pointed away from the drop, which was again 3.5, 4, I was paddling as hard as I could to get away from it. And we pulled off to the side, and we had a conference. And he says, look, my brother says, let's take it on the right side. And if we go in the water, we can recover. And I said, oh, okay, all right. I guess that sounds good. Which we did. And the fact is, we didn't make it. I mean, we collapsed. The thing capsized, and I forgot to mention I was wearing glasses at the day prior to LASIK surgery, and I'm in the water, lose my glasses, and so forth. And we're, you know what they tell you to do: put your feet pointing downriver, so that when you slam into a boulder or a tree or something, you can push off of it, and you're not going to get trapped. And so, you're trying to negotiate that. You've got your feet going forward, your head's going back. The problem was I could see that there was a sheer granite face that was going to pin me. By the way, there was an article for several years, and I got addicted to it. There was a show called I Shouldn't Be Alive. And it was a cable show, but it was really interesting. It's about people that, they kind of were doing things, but they made a little mistake. They went too early. Maybe they didn't scout the situation properly, and something happened, and really they were just glad to be alive. Well, that flashed through my head as I saw this granite face cliff facing me, and the current kind of slammed me against the wall. I turned around just in time to see the bow of the canoe coming right at me, and I didn't have my glasses, but I could see that red canoe like barreling towards me. And I dipped down just in time as the bow of that canoe go bam, right where my head was. And then it kind of goes off the side and I surface. I'm thinking, it could have split my head, really. But and then I was concerned about my brother and so forth. And I surfaced. I saw the canoe drifting downstream. It was still upright. My brother was on the opposite side of the riverbank, and we managed to collect ourselves and get our gear and so forth. And frankly, bail the canoe and recover it. We went on. The downside was that I was the driver in the car, and I couldn't see. So when we loaded up our boat, our canoe, and on the truck to go back to reclaim the car, I couldn't see. And we would pull over, in order to get some idea where we were on the road. I would pull off to the side. I got out of the car and would get maybe 3 feet away from the roadside.
Well, Michael, I've got to tell you a very similar story, and I'll be brief. But my brother got into he got in first. He ended up being a world-class kayaker. And but he was going on the Chattooga in inflatable rafts. So I went with him one time, and I was just kind of, this is all about that age, that 20-year-old age. And he said, quit being, this is very serious. And I thought, oh, this. And I realized later that he wasn't just kidding, because sometimes people get into what's called a hydraulic. Where the flow of the water keeps them down under, particularly if they don't have on a life jacket.
Yeah.
And then absolutely. And then another little story, which I think I've told before, was that I gave him a ski helmet one time. And we were sitting around and he was saying, I kind of like this ski helmet. And for all those years I went kayaking, I only needed a helmet 2 times. and of course, you hit your head on that rock. And that's it. If you get knocked out. And so one of the things we want to talk about, of course, is just boat safety. And so that was a heck of an example you gave, and that he gave and I gave about how you really need to know what you're doing, and you need to be equipped And I assume y'all knew enough about what you were doing to have all your equipment properly tied into the boat. So
Yeah, we did. I'll give us credit there.
Yeah.
Both of us were wearing life jackets.
Uh-huh.
Okay, we had life jackets.
Yeah.
They weren't just in the canoe; we were wearing them.
Yes.
And we had all of our, foodstuffs and so forth, and what they called, a dry bag,
Yes.
wrapped up and tethered to the, the gunnels of the cross stays of the canoe. So we were okay in that regard. It was just that if you don't, you can get into trouble by not properly scouting your route. And that was the great thing about Reese. Again, I don't know if I've said this before. He was Methodist minister. He passed away about 12 years ago. But they were great about telling you, okay, this is a class 3. Take it on the left side. And then there were some, and I'm going to reference this when I talk about the Flint and so forth. There's some that they'll say, look, if you go to the right side, that's a class 5 and you're dead. And they'll say that. They'll say, look, don't do that. Work your way on the left. You've got several drops that are 3s and 2s and so forth, and you can make it. But as far as just, you're just taking undue risk by going on the right side. And that's always made that the trip much more enjoyable for us, to have a little bit.
Have you been down at Columbus, Georgia?
Yes.
Since they redid, they spent a lot of money down there making the rapids safe by not having any hydraulics there. And for listeners all over the world, when we talk about a hydraulic, what we mean is where the water pushes down deep and then curls around so that an object, whether it's a person, a dog, or a log or whatever, rolls around and around underwater and keeps getting pushed under by the water that's coming down on top of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's a adequate way to describe a hydraulic. They're just dangerous. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, this was the first trip we did. And then we had a kind of a hiatus, but as we got older and then we had children of our own, we started doing every year we would identify a river, and we would my brother and I would take my 2 kids, 3 kids sometimes. My daughter sometimes wanted to do it, sometimes she didn't. And David had several kids, and they had their friends. My brother had his kids had what they called the posse down in Savannah, and we would end up with with 25 people or more. It was almost a flotilla. Because it became such a popular thing to do. And it was just so much fun, in part because we had these charts, we had these diagrams. What would happen is, on alternate years, it was either my responsibility or my brother's. We would alternate to select a route, a river and a route. And one of the ones that it kind of worked out, and on the other hand, it didn't, was a trip that we took that I had mapped out with the help of Brown's Guide from the base of Lake Jackson. Okay?
Yes.
Follow me here. Now, this, as you know, Lake Jackson is is formed by the damming of 3 rivers, and I know it's the Alcovey and the Yellow, and I don't know if the Oconee. I don't think so, but there are 3 rivers there, and they form a river that was run by Georgia Power, not by not the DNR, but that that was, the Army Corps of Engineers runs a lot of the dams. This was Georgia Power and Impoundment. So what I looked at is, okay, the Elk Mulgee comes out of Lake Jackson. And I looked at it, and what struck me as good about it was that the first third, you were negotiating what is the fall line. You know, Georgia has an ancient sea coast that's basically from Augusta to Macon to Columbus. And there's called the fall line, or if you're familiar with insects, it's the gnat line. Anything south of the that fall line is where you get gnats.
For those people in the world that are wondering what gnats are, they're little tiny bugs that don't bite you, but boy, they fly all around your face.
They make life miserable, basically.
Well, they're not as bad as mosquitoes now. Let's be fair about gnats.
Okay. All right. Well, sand gnats, I hate those.
They don't land and bite. All right.
But here's the deal. I had scouted this, and there is, and I thought, well, look at this. So according to the map, Department of Transportation, DOT map that they published for Georgia, this is a hardcore map, paper map, said that this is wildlife management area. Okay? Wildlife management. And you can camp on a wildlife management site, right? You're the attorney, you know that. Well, you can.
All right, go ahead.
So I'm looking at it, and I say, okay, we can camp here, and then we can put in, and based on the Brown's guidelines, we're going to have a day and a half of just rapids, kind of drops. We're going to have to negotiate things. It's not going to be a float ride. It's going to be it's not going to be a drifting. We're going to have to really be aware of what we're doing. And that's what you want. You want to have some challenges. You want to have some fun, doing it. So, and then the recovery point, by the way, the takeout point was at Joliet, which is right close to lake where the water starts to back up for
the Arkwright plant.
Exactly. Yeah. Lake Sinclair or something like that.
Yeah, something. Yeah, but it's above Macon.
Yes.
And by the way, for anybody else in the world that might be listening to this, we're not talking about a river system that has hippopotamuses or alligators in it. There are alligators in the far south part of Georgia, but we're talking about just having kids and people go out there and have a good time and enjoy nature and learn to handle the canoes so that they're not exhausted at the end of the day. So continue, son. You were talking about you scouted, but it didn't quite work out the way you wanted.
Well, no, it didn't. There was just a cavalcade of errors because, number one, I had picked out what I thought was, because I had scouted it before, and I had asked the locals, like, hey, is this okay? They said, absolutely. Well, we show up, and I get the word out to everybody, and we show up. There are probably 20 of us. We show up there and we start to set up camp. We get our nice little fire going and so forth. We start cooking supper. And lo and behold, this car drives up and the guy gets out and says, what are y'all doing here? I said, well, we're going to, go canoeing in the morning. We're just camping out. And we brought our supplies and they said, well, you're not supposed to be here. I said, well, why not? And the guy, he's kind of obtuse about it. He just drives off. Next thing I know, we get 6 deputies from the county sheriff's department.
Yeah,
show up. I say, well, what's the story? They said, well, this is wildlife management, but it's been leased to a private hunting club. Well, how would we know that? I didn't know that. Why would we're not hunting? We're just camping. So, well, you don't have the right to be here. Well, the next thing I know, these deputy dogs and so forth, they're walking around with their pistols out shooting armadillos. And it's a little off-putting, and we're saying, look, and one of the guys that, by the way, that was with us that evening, Malcolm McKenzie, is a really top-notch attorney who represents his own retainer for the city of Savannah. And he was saying to these people, "Hey, what are you doing? He said, no, we've got legal right to kick you off of here because it's leased." Well, we negotiated that we would leave in the morning very early.
Yeah.
Well, sure enough, 6:30 in the morning, they show up again with their pistols drawn. And we usually are pretty good about cleaning up a campsite. But, they forced us out so fast that we really, all we could do was bag our trash and stuff and leave it on a fence post. They wouldn't let us pack it up and take it downstream to dispose of it properly or put it in a car or vehicle. They just wanted to get rid of us. That was pretty negative. The trip, once we put in, the turbulence, the volume of water, and the technical requirements were such that you really had to know what you were doing. And unfortunately, one of the people that were there, all they had, Walker, was a kayak. And 50 yards downstream, they flipped. And the guy that was with me, we had to really rescue them. And we threw them some lines and so forth. We're pulling them and got them to shore. Said, "Look, you want to go with us?" And they said, "No, we're done. We're going to hike back and take our car and go home." So they got off to a rough start, but the rest of the day was just one beautiful drop after the other. Spider lilies. We saw all kind of wildlife. It was absolutely pristine and beautiful. Nope, we didn't run into any other people. But the downside again is the first night when we pulled off to the side to camp, it was again supposedly perfect, but the area had gotten so kind of built up with neighborhoods and so forth that we pulled off to camp or take a break at an island in the middle of the river, and it was private property. And they had security cameras on the trees. So they were kind of monitoring what we were doing. And you're like, what? This is not a good experience. And after that, the navigation was really easy because it was a float trip. It wasn't technically demanding, but it was it was a float trip. And then we pulled out where they filmed one of the settings from Fried Green Tomatoes.
Yes.
At Joliet.
Yeah.
And it was, the food was great. The fellowship was great. But the importance, I guess I tell you that story because the importance, what we're looking at in some of these rivers is that they should be open to the public. They should be navigable, and they should be within as long as you were camping within, say, 30 feet of the bank, you should be okay. But
it should be, but I don't think Georgia law is going to change. In Sweden, they have a thing called all man's right. And it says that you can, as long as you're not camped within 200 meters of a home or something like that, that you have a right to camp out and you have a right to cross. You can't hunt on other people's land, but you do have a right to pick mushrooms and berries on land that might be privately owned, but it's called all man's right. And I thought that's a kind way for a society to act toward people that just don't own the land. So we're having, with the Riverkeeper system, we have three issues, as you know, and one of them is water quality, one is water flow, and the other is access. And so the access question, people in Georgia, of course, have a right to go down the river in a boat. But once they anchor, they throw out an anchor or they tie to a tree or something like that, they've tied on or touched private land until you get down to the area where we call navigable, down below the fall, way below the fall line, where essentially where steamboats could come up the river.
Right. Right.
So, and then fishing rights are an issue too, is by that same problem. And it's just something that every society in the world tries to work out one way or another, and not always to the benefit of average people, rather than
and not only just
landowners.
the benefit of the individual, the canoeist or the average citizen, but the wildlife that are involved in there. We had one trip, we were on the Oconee, and you'll get these places we call sieves, where you've got a channel, and the next thing you know, boom, it just disappears. The channel just seemingly disappears into cypress, sweet gum, just a morass of local flora, and what you're trying to do, if to get out of it, because you don't know, there is no channel, is you just kind of always go down current. You look at where the current's going and you go that direction, and hopefully at some point you'll find the channel again. Well, we had a situation where we were doing that on the Oconee, trying to find our way out. The channel kind of disappeared, and we get out, and this is well south of the fall line, by the way, and you're having to carry your canoe, portage your canoe over cypress knees and so forth. And I'd say the water's might have been 3-4 feet deep or something like that. Occasionally you hit a drop or something, or a hole. And, we're just working our canoes downstream. And lo and behold, I look over to the right, and there's like a 12-foot gator there, just like cruising around. And again, I'm thinking, how is Walker going to write my obituary here?
Yeah. How am I going to? Yeah. So I believe y'all. How many have you probably been on? 80% of the floatable rivers of Georgia?
Oh yeah, easily. Yeah. You name it, we've been on it. One of the more interesting trips was the Ohoopee. And they have a section on the Ohoopee that's kind of unique. It's called the Ohoopee Dunes. And we camped there, and it's like an inland sand dune situation. It's very bizarre. But it's also very populated with a lot of, it's protected, gopher tortoises.
Uh-huh.
And, gopher tortoises are protected species in Georgia. And they were all, I've never seen so many tunnels or holes or where the gopher tortoises were.
For those
but if you do a little research,
yeah, for those people who don't know about gopher, they're a very important part of the ecology below the fall line, because they dig tunnels, and during a fire, all the animals run into these gopher holes, these gopher tunnels. The rabbits and the snakes and quail and everything else gets down there, and they huddle while the fire burns over the top, and then they all come out.
Right.
And while they're down there, they don't eat each other or anything like that. So gophers are very important. I mean, the gopher tortoises are very important to Georgia, and that's why they're protected species. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but fire is a very important part of the ecology of of uh, of the whole landscape in many places.
Mhm.
It's my understanding the Indians used to burn off vast areas every year to keep
They
down
they
underbrush
they
and
they manage their forest.
yes,
The
yes.
indigenous peoples, Muskogee tribes and so forth, they did manage the forest that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the thing about these gopher tortoises, like you pointed out, is they are habitat in times of duress and routinely occupied, which is weird to me. You'll have a gopher tortoise in there, and if you're looking for the largest eastern diamondback rattlesnakes that you'll ever want to find, they're in these gopher tortoise holes. So the point is, the idea of camping there was a bit unnerving. We didn't want to really spend a lot of time there. But here's what I was getting to about the Ohoopee. It was a great trip. Highly recommend. Again, the Ohoopee Dunes is just phenomenal. We're put in there. We're cruising around on the Ohoopee. It's actually a gorgeous canoe trip, and the flow is good. We've had good volume, so that you didn't have to portage. You had some falls, trees that would block the channel. Sometimes you have to go underneath or pull your canoe over them, but you could negotiate that. We're cruising along, and the next thing I see on the right hand side, the starboard side, I guess, of the canoe is like a 6-inch PVC white pipe, and it's stuck into the river. And on the bank is a diesel operated pump, and it is sucking huge volumes of water out of the river for agricultural irrigation. That kind of thing. Soybean and cotton, okay? And you could see the field off to the right. The next thing I know, we get past the pipe and we're having to drag our canoes. So fast forward a year from that, and the agricultural commissioner, who is from Commerce, Georgia, by the way, at the time, Black, who is also in charge of making sure that your gas station pumps are properly calibrated. I always thought that was kind of an interesting juxtaposition of responsibilities. Gas pumps and agricultural activities, but they are. And he was at a Kiwanis Club meeting, and I said, Mr. Black, I told him about the thing. I said, it seemed to me that these couple of these private farmers were just taking all the water right out of the river. There wasn't anything left. Wasn't anything left for us. The birds. We literally had to walk for a mile, dragging our canoes along before we could get back into enough water to continue our trip. And he kind of looked at me, and he was visibly upset, and he said, "Well, they pay a lot of money for that, to withdraw that water." Those farmers pay a lot of money to take that water out of that river. Okay. Kind of an interesting debate about water rights. And as a caveat to this, one of the rivers, too, that, I highly recommend people do with canoes or kayaks. You could do kayaks with these. The Nantahala. The Nantahala has got a really nice put-in spot. It's very popular. And the put-in spot is right below the dam. I don't know if it's Carter's Lake. I'm not sure of the name of the dam, but that's where it is, right below a dam. And you put in at the discharge point of the dam. And we put in about 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning one summer. We were canoeing down. We wanted to get down, I don't know, we wanted to try to do 14 miles. The point is, if you do not get to your takeout point by 5 o'clock, they turn the water off. So that they're building water up for power generation for the next, so people can air condition their houses. So it's just a weird thing when people talk about the advantage of renewable, using renewables like water, hydroelectric power generation, or windmills and so forth. And they never think about the consequences, because when you dam every stream and rivulet and river, and the volume isn't really that great, then what you're doing is you're converting an ecosystem into a ditch or a power tube. And they told us, they said, look, the outfitter did, they said, look, you're going to put in and you're going to have a good time, but you need to get off of that river at 5 o'clock, because you're not going to get water after 5 o'clock.
I went down at one time. I've only been down there one time, and it was so cold. I couldn't believe how cold it was. And then about 5 miles down, we came to it must have been a class 5. Boy, it was big. It was so big that even my kayaking brother, who, like I say, is a world-class kayaker, I think he's done it once. And but any rate, so that's interesting. And when you talk about that, I think about Tallulah Gorge here in Georgia. And the Tallulah Gorge River was second only to Niagara Falls in terms of its tourist draw. In the old days, back when there was a railroad that went up there, and there were hotels all around, and people would go on long day hikes down to these magnificent waterfalls. And then Georgia Power in about 1910 was got whatever permit, or I don't know if they had a permit in that, but they built a dam up there. And so Tallulah Gorge almost never has the kind of water flow that it had back in the old days.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, we've done the Nantahala, excuse me, the Ocoee, which we've done. That was used in the 1996 Olympics for canoeing competitions.
Yeah.
Olympic competitions, and for a while there, you could do that in the put in place, but they had a fire there or something which destroyed that welcome center, whatever it was, just burned to the ground. But that was one of the difference between the Nantahala is it's got some really significant drops, but you got a break. You'll have a 3, like a class 3 drop or a class 3.5 drop or something. I don't know if there's any 4, but you'll boom, boom, boom. And then you can kind of recover, bail out your canoe and keep going. The Ocoee is just like continuous. There's no break. It's so you're exhausted by the time you get to the takeout point, which curiously enough is an intake for a power generating plant, and you get out there. So you're always, when you're doing these canoe trips, it's helpful to know what kind of industrial policy that you're working with that manages some of these things. And I would recommend anybody in the summer, if you want to do one that's really fun, that's not too challenging, but is really interesting, both in terms of just the visuals and the beauty of it, is the Hiawassee. And my brother and I have done that several times, and our family has done that several times. It's just absolutely, the water quality is great, volume is good, and you don't have to worry about someone, calling the police if you pull off to the side. The Hiawassee is fantastic. As far as the other rivers, the southern rivers go, and my favorite really is the Lazar Creek to the Flint. That is fantastic. But
Where's the put in on that?
it's in Talbot County, not too far from Talbotton.
Yeah.
You put in there.
What about
And
the Etowah? The Etowah looks like, I've never been on it, but I wondered
Yeah.
if that was a nice.
that's the one we've never done, frankly, because it's just gotten so populated.
I see. Okay.
It's not because what we like to do is put on the river and camp out at least 2 nights. And the thing about the Etowah where we are, it becomes so incredibly populated that we never really considered it.
Yeah.
Maybe we should have, but it just was so congested. But what we ended up doing for our own protection is we would go most of these trips with a second or third weekend of February. And you're thinking, wow, that's kind of weird that you would want to go in February. But let me tell you, you don't have to worry about snakes, and you don't have to worry about insects, and you don't have to worry about reptiles. All that said, when you're doing a lot of Georgia rivers, particularly involving the fall line or south of the fall line, like the Satilla, the Ohoopee, the Canoochee, the Mulgi, the Altamaha. People talk about snakes. They talk about gators. Let me tell you what you have to worry about. Wasps.
Oh yes, yes. I'm so aware of that, and getting over too close to the edge, and you hit near a wasp nest. God, they don't leave you alone either.
No, you're in the water.
Yeah.
That's all you can do is get out of your boat, hold onto the canoe, and just float downstream and hope for the best that they'll leave you alone. But you get a red wasp, and the people that, we've put in at places, honestly, Walker, people have said, people that kind of live there say, what are you doing? Like Briar Creek comes to mind. Briar Creek flows into the Savannah, and it's a great canoe experience. Prior to Hurricane, Helene? Post Helene, so many trees were pushed into the stream there that it's just too difficult to portage everywhere. But before that, you could. But when we were putting in, a guy was saying, what do we need to look for? What do we need to be concerned about? You said hornets and wasps, because they love to build their nests right over the river.
Yeah.
They do.
Yeah, and you need to stay out in the middle. That's what I tell everybody, because you might sneak up on one of those things before you even know it. They're awful. So, and I've heard of people having a snake fall into the boat with them, but that's rare. And even if they do, most snakes out there are not poisonous. But so the fright of snakes scares us all. But at any rate, hey, this has been great, and I'm kind of trying to figure out how we get back to sort of the whole scout thing about where did you actually learn the skills of canoeing itself?
I'm glad you brought that up, because the place where one of the first places we ever did was, Camp Thunder. And we did, with the help from the scouts, we put in at Spruill Bluff.
Yes.
And we worked our way. And this is the thing, if you know what you're doing, which I'm not saying we did then, but we do now maybe, is from Spruill Bluff, we wanted to go downriver past Yellow Jacket Shoals.
Yes.
The problem with that is that Yellow Jacket Shoals is really technically very demanding.
It depends on how much water. If it's a low river, it's like choked with rocks. If it's real high, it's dangerous.
And we have been there where we have seen, they weren't in our party, but it was somebody else.
Yeah. And
they had a really nice blue hole fiberglass canoe that was bent in half.
Yep. When I went
Yeah.
through, there were 2 aluminum canoes that were opened up like banana peels.
Yeah.
And I thought, if you had been between, if that boat was upstream of you and you were pinned against a rock and that boat got on you, it would have just crushed you. I mean, no question about it. But at any rate, I noticed that Elliott here, who has to work in the morning, just is yawning.
I
And
didn't mean to.
Elliott, I want you to. I know that you had the tremendous canoe experience of the Northern Tier, and we've
Yeah.
talked about that on a lot of our episodes, and we talked about those wonderful canoe trips in the Apalachia Basin, and of course we've had the Flint River Keeper on. And I'm really glad we had Michael, because if we start going back and say, now listen, you might be in the middle of Kenya, or you might be in someplace in the Philippines or something, Scout, but look around, because the adventure is right there. And canoes are the way to go, because they will carry a lot of equipment. They'll carry your camping gear a lot more than a kayak can. And they can get through tight places a lot better than a John boat or some kind of a big rowboat can. So, the Indians didn't use, and the voyageurs didn't use canoes for no reason. They're adapted to the
It's
kind
a
of
beautiful design. It's a
Yep.
beautiful design. And
Yes.
if you want, you can cover them. You can tent them so
Yes.
to minimize the water that would flow in. So it kind of can function as a larger kind of kayak thing.
Yep.
But again, if you're looking at doing a multiple number of days where you're camping out, we try to do three nights, at a minimum. You've got to have gear, and to have that, you can't carry it with a kayak.
No.
And you don't, and a John boat or something doesn't have the maneuverability of a canoe. So
Yeah.
I don't know. We just thoroughly enjoyed it. Really have.
How about you, Elliott? What do you want to add in? Because you've been so quiet.
Well, I wanted to say that after some of my small fat boy experiences up at the Northern Tier, that portaging kind of became a bit of a curse word. So I hated to hear you say that all the time.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed the stories. It sounds like you had a lot of adventure. Something that stuck out with me during this show is you said something that, in a lake you can go in circles, but a river goes somewhere. And I kind of want this show to tell everybody to, hey, try to be a river, go somewhere, do something, be a river with your life.
Yeah, go somewhere, right?
Go somewhere and do it.
Yeah.
And really get out there and have fun and stop listening to this podcast and go outside and get in a canoe, What do you do?
That's right. That's
Sure.
right.
Yeah.
Thank
Been a
Yes,
great
Michael.
show.
Thank you so much for coming on and saying how we all can just get out there and do it. And that's what we want, is for people to get out there and do it and enjoy it and get their kids to do it. I think so many children these days don't have the experience of getting out and doing it. The canoe trip, they might take the little 2-hour trip with their parents, down the Chattahoochee at Atlanta, where you go from 3 miles, but that's better than nothing,
Mhm.
but to really get out there and go on a long trip and camp out, that's the way.
That's the
So,
way.
all right.
Well, good night, folks.
Good night, folks. Good night, Michael. Thank you. Do you have anything to wind up with, Michael? You look like you maybe have one last little bit of wisdom there, besides
Well,
playing.
I like what Elliott, his observation is a good one. The just finally, it's not only just the canoeing, but when you're camping out and you're there and like 2 o'clock in the morning, and there's a riot of barred owls screaming at each other, and then coyotes going at it, and frogs, and I mean, it's irreplaceable. It's beautiful.
It's
Yeah.
natural, and we're supposed to have that.
Yes,
At least a little bit.
at least a little bit.
At least a little bit.
All right.
Well, good night, folks.
Good
See y'all
night.
for coming to another episode of Aids to Scouting.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.